This video explanation is for the quotient rule. You're going to find that it is very similar to the product rule, except there's a few small differences. So just to start with, notice what we are given. A function f at x equals g at x over h at x. So we have a clear numerator and denominator. So the start of our rule is going to look very familiar, where we take the derivative of the top and multiply it by the bottom. But unlike the product rule, instead of adding, we're going to subtract, which that's logical, that multiplication matched with adding and division matches with subtraction. So now we're going to take the derivative of just the top, normally, times the derivative of the bottom. So we could shorten that into the derivative of the top times the bottom minus the top times the derivative of the bottom. But here's where the quotient rule is very different than the product rule. There's a denominator here, and the denominator is going to be the bottom squared. So notice that it's just h at x squared there on the bottom, not h prime at x. So we're going to take a second here and complete a few examples. So we're going to start with example A. Clearly, all three of these examples deal with quotients. We have a numerator and we have a denominator, and we're trying to get the derivative. You'll also notice that for these examples, unlike the ones we've seen so far, it's not an easy thing to try and get rid of that denominator. So there's no easy factor that we can factor out and cancel things. We're sort of stuck with a numerator and a denominator, so we need a strategy to deal with that. So for part A, we're going to start by writing f prime at x. And our answer is going to follow this pattern from our rule. So the first thing we're going to do is find g at x. G prime at x, where the top is g at x. So basically, we could reword that to say just the derivative of the top. So the derivative of the top times the bottom minus the top times the derivative of the bottom. So that's the entire numerator. Again, derivative of the top times the bottom minus the top times the derivative of the bottom, all divided by the bottom squared. So let's do another one. As soon as you start to solve this third example, you may want to come back and change, as always, that root sign into an exponent of 1/2. You don't have to do that every time if you want to do that in your head. But it's a good idea to write it at least at the beginning when you're just learning. So now we're going to get the derivative. We're going to be really careful that these two are equal. So these two are the same, but that we make sure we write f prime at x over here. That we don't just keep saying equals, 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 because you will lose marks for that, and that's not clear. So now we're going to follow our rule. So we're going to take the derivative of the top. So the derivative of the top is going to look like 1/2 x to the negative 1/2 minus 3. Multiply that by the bottom. Subtract the top. Multiplied by the derivative of the bottom, which is going to be 40 x to the power of 7 minus 6, all divided by the bottom written exactly squared. Okay, finally for our bottom example, we have a couple of things going on here. Notice that the numerator involves the product rule. So we've got a big function here times another function here. So in order to answer this one, we're going to need product rule and the quotient rule. So I'm going to start answering it way over here just so that we have lots of space. All right. If we look at the numerator, when we want to get the derivative of this entire numerator, that's going to involve getting two separate pieces. So because there are two separate pieces, we're going to have to use the product rule. So the product rule says get the derivative of that first bracket first. So the first bracket is going to be 4x minus 3 times the second bracket plus the first bracket times the derivative of the second bracket. So all of that was just the derivative of the numerator. So if we were to go back to our overall rule, we did just the first part. We did g prime at x. So that whole thing has to get multiplied by the denominator. And I purposely made a mistake here by not putting brackets around that first section. And if I were to leave it like this, this would be incorrect because this 4x minus 3 is only getting multiplied by these second two things. And it should be multiplied by the whole part that we got from the product rule. So adding those brackets is not just to help you stay organized, it actually changes the equation. So we've got our new equation, the derivative of the top times the bottom minus the top times the derivative of the bottom. All divided by the bottom squared.